Okay, we're going to go live now.
Hey. Miigwech. We've never been in a drum group together, but that worked really good. Oh, miigwech everybody for joining us today. Minaduna Bekwe, Jisnikaz, Wawashkiji, and Dodim, Sudbury, and Dejaba, Nishnabee, Métis, Kwe, and Dao. I'm Lynn LaValle. I'm a citizen of the Métis Nation of Ontario, and I welcome everybody to this webinar today. It's a day that we selected intentionally, so I'm very happy for those of you who are able to make it, for those of you who might be watching on YouTube, and those of you who will watch this a little bit later. I want to start first by introducing myself and my family and where they come from, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Stoop Talk speaker series, and then we'll get into the conversation. So I've been, I introduce myself and my people and where they come from because it's what we do, right? When we go across the country, even globally, we talk about who our family is, who our parents were, who our grandparents were. So I was born in Sudbury. My dad and the LaValle line are from the Temiskaming area, and the last names are Taylor, Richard, Pepin, to name a few. And my mom, she was born in Timmins. Her mom was from Maniwaki, and my grandfather was from Swan Lake in Manitoba. And there the last names are LaBelle, Lafon, McIver, Godin, Swain, and Lilly. I was born in Sudbury, Ontario, and in Sudbury I actually was born into low-income housing, and that park was called Cabot Park or Cambrian Heights, and we moved into Toronto's Regent Park in the 1970s. So that has really shaped a lot about who I am and where I come from, and it really has shaped what I've named this speaker series. You know, when growing up in Regent Park, we used to hang out on the stoop and talk on the stoop, and you know, and the stoops are entrances to buildings, or in our backyard, for instance, there was this little structure. It was a concrete structure, and underneath is where we could put our garbage, and there was a little milk container on the wall, right, back in the day when they used to deliver milk. Not that I had milk delivered by horse and buggy, but you know, that was the concept then, and they'd put the milk into the little door and you could open it up on the inside and get your milk. So, you know, I grew up hanging out on stoops, right? And the conversations that we would have on the stoops were amazing. You could start off on the stoop with 1 or 2 people, and within an hour, you'd have 15 people pop in, have conversation, and it's real talk. So really what the Stoop Talk is about, or the Stoop Talk series, it's about urban Indigenous life, my life and your life. So I want to welcome the first 2 speakers to this Stoop Talk series. And I'll start with Dr. Percy Lazard.
Why is Kwista in Chichen and we? I want to give thanks to kŵil for this day. Before we say anything else as a Squeesty Scale, we first must identify who we are and our responsibilities and roles. In doing so, this is not an attack on anyone other than engaging in my in chaptich as a scaloch, as a person who has responsibilities as a firekeeper, who's a helper, and in my own internal governance system as a hereditary chief. My name is Chichen, and it was gifted to me by my life giver, as it's the life givers who name all those who are born. And so that's the name I was given, and it's Wolf. So all my wolf relatives who have joined I see you. And all those who have the responsibilities of that as a clan, I am here to be part of your pack and in good relations as an invited guest to uphold the teachings of your protocol, as these lands that where I'm an invited guest of the Dish with One Spoon, which was amongst the Indigenous people prior to settlers, occupiers, arrivants, that I willingly participate and uphold in non-interference and ensuring that the person to my left and my right has something, and that whatever canoe we're in, that I will be a participant and upholding that. My relations are the Lizards from Sinpington, which in my language is the village between lakes. The Krugers from Arrow Lakes, where we descended from, were the oldest family and the largest family and the oldest family and the largest family and the oldest family of the largest family, because my life provider says you have to say it 3 times, and then 4th people can take it or leave it or not acknowledge or care. So yeah, so people being here, hopefully that means you actually care and you're not here to surveil, right? Because that's the experience when Indigenous people come together, that people want to observe and whatever your intentions are, to hold space for Indigenous thinkers and folks who want to come together. So which brings me to the Baptiste from Tupaka. So I wanted to bring my introductions of identifying an acknowledgement of my positionality and responsibilities in an era in the academic industrial complex of race shifters and pretend Indians, right? So it's important to identify who I am, who my people are, and who claims me. I am the adult child to Indian residential school survivors, Valerie, Moses, and day school survivor, Pierre. My maternal grandparents are also survivors of the Indian residential schools. At Balwichia, Twi, when we announce Twi, that is a signifier that they have become an ancestor. So Twi, Balwichia, Elizabeth Lizard, last name Manuel. And Twi, Stalhula, Ernest Lizard. My paternal grandparents, who are also Indian residential school survivors, Twi, Catherine Baptiste, last name Alec, Twi, George Baptiste. We are all status First Nation members under the Indian Act, and to number 597, Penticton Indian Band, but under my custom membership code, Squeeskelo claim me as one of their own, based on who my parents were, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents. There is no clear, and I say with certainty that I am Indigenous. So yes, and my people, the Skilo, have lived on our territories from time immemorial in the Okanagan Valley. And it goes in this side of the invisible border and that side of the invisible border of the nation state of USA. And it's from Mica Creek, just north of what we now know as Revelstoke, and east to Kootenay Lake, and south to Washington State, and west into the Nikolai Valley. So that's a little bit about me. I have been in constant conversation due to the patience and generosity of Black thinkers, Black femmes, Black trans folks, Black queer folks, Black disabled folks. And they have been extremely generous with me as an Indigenous person. And I continue to benefit from the labor that they continue to give to not only society, but to me, and by extension, my family, bio chosen extended, community, and nation. And I wanted to bring this conversation to the stoop, because much like in Regent Park, where I'm at right now as well, we also engage in conversations around places such as the stoop, the stairs, the rock, the river, the creek. And I'm very grateful to be able to be in conversation about something that many Indigenous femmes, 2S LGBTQI disabled folks have lived under the conditions of as a result of ongoing colonialism. So I want to bring into the light as a firekeeper the ways in which there's been an active disappearance and erasure of 2S LGBTQI folks who are also disabled and young folks. So Limlam, raise my hands up to you. And for those in attendance who are trying to make sense of today, whether the nation state does it, whether your own department, the leader of your department or program in the academic industrial complex or nonprofit or the corporate world has done anything for today in orange shirts, or the legacy of now the 10,028 relatives who never came home. I hold space for you. I see you, I love you, and you matter. And our pain matters regardless if Tim Hortons wants you to have a trauma donut or not.
Oh my gosh, always keeping it real. Oh, miigwech. Dr. Andeg, Dr. Joanne DeNova. Do you like to
yeah, it's just Andeg. We don't need any doctor.
Okay.
That's miigwech to both of you. I feel really honored to be here and to be included on this panel. And I was I guess I could start by saying Anim Burun and then Maganag Bangi at the Gonanata Nishnabem Ninga Gojaton Jinishnabe Moyan and Nimiki Benesik in the go Idash on deck and Dishnakas on deck and now. I was a scene in Dodam Equa Kuchiching Natonji. I was born right over here, across, right out the window, across the street there at St. Mike's Hospital. That's where my mom, she was a residential school survivor. She went there till she was 12. She went to residential school, and then they said she was incorrigible. They said she was possessed by demons, and they sent her away to training school in Toronto, and then to foster homes after foster home after foster home after that. And by the time she was 16, she was pregnant with my sister, and then I came sometime after that. So that was a 60s scoop in 1957 when she was scooped. That's how long it's been going on. And I like to say that a lot. And I think people maybe sometimes get tired of hearing me say that. You know, I was born here. I was born right here to this teenage Indigenous young woman who was scooped and abused in so many ways. But I like to say it because I want to always remember my mother, who did not receive any respect in her whole life. She was a very brilliant woman. She was a spiritual woman, and I kind of want to speak on her behalf. And before her, my grandmother as well, also a woman who wasn't given any respect. And all of them, you know, they were always, I come from a line of, you might say, crazy women, right? But I wear that like a badge of honor, you know? I mean, I don't need to, I claim who I am. I have no respect. My respect is all gone. My, and what I'm doing, like from the ashes, I want to do something. I want to make art that speaks for the young people. Because when I look around the world and I try to think about the 7 generations, I can't think 7 generations anymore. I can't think of 7 generations. And I see all these young people losing hope. And so I've made it my mission, because I have nothing left, you know. I have no prestige left, no career. I have no reputation. So I want to do everything I can to bring hope back to the young people, because there is a way, and it's in our old ways. It's in bringing back our old ways, and it's embedded in the language as well. I'm really honored to be here speaking with you women, and or I mean, whatever, I don't know what I am. Lynn asked, apologize there. Lynn asked me, do you identify as two-spirit? And I said, well, I was asked one time, oh, are you two-spirit? And I said, oh, at least, you know, and I guess I would say that I don't really have, I just am. I don't have an identity, and I'm not gonna, you know, if you need me to check a box, I'll check two-spirit, but I just am. And we'll see where this goes. I'm thankful that you have this Stoop Talk series, and let's see where it goes.
Miigwech, Andeg, and Percy. I wanted to kind of, you know, not ignore what you said in your introductions, but I do want to get into the conversation, and I'll save that for further dialogue, especially the lack of respect, right? I hear you. I just wanted you to know that, and like feeling that from you as well. So I wanted to go back to Dr. Lazard and Misogyny-Kʷil, Misogyny-Miskwaa, misogyny within the Indigenous community. When you hear that, what are your thoughts? Like, what comes to mind for you?
I want to be very real here. Someone before me has labored and had their teeth kicked in, has been removed from spaces, has not been given entryway into spaces, and to come and it's because of those harms and violences and disappearances that I actually get to be in conversation here. So I want to be very clear that I did not come to this by myself. I have people, again, who are generous and hella patient with me as an Indigenous person, and has been able to help me come into this space of something that has lived in my bones, in my DNA, and gifted me words and reminded me of concepts. Kʷil came because such comrade, colleague, sib, fam, reminded me that even as Moya Bailey was able to gift the world with the atrocities that Black femmes and Black women experience in their own communities, was able to remind me, Percy, use your language, right? Center in Jilkan, when you want to engage in this concept that you lived through, survived, and continue to experience because of ongoing colonialism, dispossession, and disappearance, especially on a day that's meant to have people reflect, take action, but yet I'm always still getting it in the teeth myself. So Misogyny-Kʷil came from me trying to make sense of why people were treating me the way they treated me, and members of my community. And when I say members of my community, I mean Indigenous femmes, Indigenous women, 2S LGBTQI folks, trans folks like myself, disabled folks, and why it was from members of my own community. Now, this is not license for those in attendance for you to weaponize what I am sharing against other Indigenous people. Hopefully you'll take this as an opportunity to hear the experiences of the ongoing violence that I have experienced. And hopefully that provides an opportunity that my relatives who are younger, my relatives who are not in a position as a chair of Indigenous studies, relatives who don't have alphabet soup behind their name like me, right? And can enter into conversations like this and use the words that I'm sharing or that we share against them, right? I think that's another tactic of colonialism. So I wanted to really look at and share words like the 6,000 people so generously did and gave us the 94 calls to action and all the thousands of documents. But yet, even as we have all those thousands of pages for the TRC and 94 calls to action, they only have a half a page to the experience of who should have been my elders and my knowledge keepers, to us LGBTQIA folks in the 126 years residential school era that now gave birth to child welfare. So if you're a social worker in the room, you're part of social work education, you have a lot of work to do. Right? Because there's specific sections of the TRC that are specific to child welfare and to education. And 7 years later, what have you done? If you are a professor, an instructor, a licensed social worker, to reduce the harm of child removal into child welfare, which is the new residential school. So again, it's a storying. And I came to this because I started to go to places where they did not give membership to the academic industrial complex because they actually did not want Indigenous people. They wanted the performance of indigeneity. They wanted someone who says they're Indigenous, but's not actually Indigenous, right? They wanted folks to smudge something away, and then the real work happens, and that the person who has those particular teachings and gifts of the ceremony of smudging and grounding and medicines and the responsibilities of hosting and sharing that with the space, to leave when the real policy work, whether it's in corporations, whether it's in universities, whether it's in the nonprofit industrial complex, or on the land, to disappear Indigenous people. So I wanted to think about these conversations because of the way I would continue to be treated, because as I made entry into this space as a legitimate, verified First Nations person, right? People started to see me as a threat. They saw my confidence as a threat. They started to bully me and disappear me from continuing to be offered positions, whether it's courses as a contract lecturer, because I was precariously, much like many experiences of people in attendance, or the people on this panel, or the people who are watching this later have experienced precarity. And as I continued to be in spaces, I saw that who they were giving passageway to, those people did not look like me. They didn't sound like me. They didn't have the lived experiences like me. And I wanted to know what the actual heck was going on. And I saw it was also when I looked to my relatives, because colonialism wants me to believe that's an isolated incident and then it's siloed. So once I looked to my siblings to the left and to the right, with people with shared intersecting identities, they were experiencing the same types of violence. They were not given the same opportunities. They were not honored and celebrated. So that's some of the things that I wanted to continue to be in conversation about. Those are some of the things that I was observing, and the experiences under capitalism and colonialism that I continued to experience, because I was not the Indian they had in mind. I didn't do a dog and pony show. I was actually Indigenous, and I knew who I was and where I was from and my responsibilities in terms of relationality and building relationships. And so I think I'll stop, and I will sit back on my soap stoop over here.
Yeah, I was trying to recreate a stoop in the house, but it wasn't really working. Miigwech Percy. I just wanted to comment, Hunter's Day, Alan Zachariah, who's Skabewis for Elder Vern Harper, and Irish Gabewas for Elder Bern Harper, also said, you repeat something 7 times. So you have the teaching that you repeat it 3 times, and we repeat it 7 times. I know that you know that I know that you know that I know that you know, right? And people will hear that, spirit will hear that, creator will hear that. Undeg, for you, and you know, we've had conversations about this in the past, and we really wanted to talk about, when we hear about misogyny, we don't think about misogyny within our communities as well, right? And Percy has talked a lot about that. For you, what does that mean? And what experiences might you want to share?
Misogyny in our community? Well, I mean, I think what Percy was saying about bullying, I think is the piece that I'd like to pick up, because for me, being whatever ambiguous gender, and you know, I never said I wasn't a shapeshifter, and I've found that colonial misogyny, you know, can be weaponized, and then all of a sudden, because I don't present as the right kind of woman. I mean, I say Anishinaabe kwe and thou, Anishinaabe kwe and thou. You know, this is I was born here to Anishinaabe kwe. I'm Anishinaabe kwe. I gave birth to a child, you know, I raised that child. I'm an Anishinaabe kwe. And yet I found that misogyny has been weaponized against me as a woman, because I'm not the right kind of colonial, you know, the colonial picture of what a woman should be. And so I can be put in the male position, and then bullied in that way, and silenced by Indigenous men. That Indigenous men can be deployed by, you know, I don't know, but it can be deployed to silence Indigenous women. I mean, I was kind of just going around there, but I would say that I really, you know, when Percy, you mentioned the bullying, it's so real. It's so real, and to see it coming from our men sometimes, you know, it's, I think that we need to address it. We need to address it. Maybe I'll just leave it there and see where we go.
Yeah, miigwech. You know, I remember going to a Chiefs of Ontario meeting because we were trying to pass a resolution years ago to have the Aboriginal Team Ontario supported for the next North American Indigenous Games. So we had to pass a resolution there. And as you know, a lot of the chiefs, I don't know what percentage of chiefs are men, cisgendered men. But, you know, I went there and completely erased, right? Literally looking at me and scowling at me, and then positioning, right? But I knew more about what we were talking about than the man that they turned to, right? The Indigenous man that they turned to. So, and I also just wanted to put out there as well, like when it comes to our ceremony, you know, what I see happening is that women, two-spirit, trans, non-binary, ceremonialist, traditional healers are out there, but they're being gate-kept by Indigenous men. Like, that's something that is happening. Like, who can tell us how to do full moon ceremony? You know, we should be able to do our full moon ceremony. We can be fire keepers, right?
Yep.
You know, exactly, Percy. You can turn off. Yeah.
Respectful.
No, we're conversations. So I think it's going to work, because
Yeah.
you know, I think when someone pipes in, people can still hear, but you know, we can do it. We can be the fire keepers.
And we always had women warriors.
Exactly.
And look where we are now. We need, you know, you know, what women have women's power has been silenced.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also like you know, we always had our women warriors. We always had our strong ones that walk the middle ground, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The ones who you know, and we need those people now to step up and to lead us, and we don't need people to tell us to get back into our place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or to be the right kind of this or that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I really want to nuance the conversation here as well.
Mm-hmm.
When the folks who tend to get bullied and gatekeeped and transgressed upon is by Indigenous folks, white passing folks, cisgendered folks. Let's be very clear about that. And I know not only do we have to survive today as Indigenous people and Indigenous people in attendance, but we have to emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, physically prepare for October 4th. For those who do not know what that means, it's the day, the national day to acknowledge the relatives who have gone missing and or were later found murdered. And I unfortunately am someone who's had now 6 relatives, 5 of them who were reported missing and later found murdered, and 1 in the last 2 years who is never going to be the same again, my youngest sibling, who is now in long-term care because they were harmed by settlers. So we have to prepare for this day, and there have been many things, initiatives done by Indigenous people to outside of systems and structures like institutions, whether they be the federal, provincial, city, nonprofit sector, academic industrial complex, that we've pushed back and wanted to say, here, this is happening. You are trying to not bring it to the consciousness of settlers or people. And some of those spaces and places in terms of ceremony and the ways in which we research and say we're going to do what we can with what little we have, has been dictated by cisgendered folks, men, heterosexual folks, able-bodied folks in the Indigenous community, right? And when I helped mobilize with grassroots folks and had the folks of people in attendance here hold space for me and my family, the urban setting for blankets for Tina. That was the first time, and all the actions for indigeneity, Indigenous people, young folks, and all the ways in which we experience violence on the daily, that someone didn't come up to me and say, Percy, you got to be in a skirt. Right? That was the first time. And guess what? It was the generosity and patience that I actually felt safe and all my intersecting identities to actually grieve the loss of a young person. And even though they were in Manitoba, and I then a couple of years later worked across the street from Tina's Safe Haven on Selkirk Avenue there, and was able to meet some wonderful, amazing folks who were also able to hold space for me to grieve many things that I and on the daily have to survive and recover from. So yeah, so very few spaces ceremonially that I can go, and all my intersecting identities, and feel and be honored. The space be created for me to be honored and celebrated for being Indigenous, Skeloch, to be a firekeeper, to be a helper, to be Minimchilix, which in my language is a way that our language keepers came up with as non-binary as part of the trans spectrum, or Stamia, which again in my language is the word for two-spirit. because of the ways in which I guess people are trying to help us be the right kind of Indian.
Yeah.
As we're all trying to come out from ongoing colonialism. So yeah.
Yeah. Were you going to say something on Dag?
No, I just really like that the people trying to help us be the right kind of Indian, when if there's one way to be Anishinaabe, it's free. Free, just free to be your own self, you know. How about you?
Me?
Lynn?
I wanted to, a couple of things I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the stoop talk, but I'll get back to that. And, you know, the relationships that we have with our Black brother and sisters, right? Afro-Indigenous people, and how for all three of us, that's extremely important in our lives, not in our academic life. We don't perform that. That's not a performance, right? So with respect to stoop talk, and I already emphasized that, and I thank Dr. Borum for posting something about, you know, how stoops originated in the US. And it was the same in Canada, but for me in Regent Park, you know, that was a place where everybody, it was rent geared to income. Everybody was well below the poverty line. That's a commonality that we had, right? And that was the starting point. You know, we had each other's backs to this day, and both of you know, because you live very close to Regent Park or in Regent Park, you have each other's back, right? And I feel very safe in Regent Park. Maybe it's a bit different now because of the revitalization, but you know, that's a commonality. So we would hang out on the stoops and have conversations, and you know, a lot of what we go through and what we went through was the same, you know, and we could relate to each other in that way. So I want to kind of spring from that, Andag, and really talk about like the respect piece, right? And you know, misogyny within community and their intersectionality of that, and how that plays out in ceremony, how that plays out, you know, with respect to intersectionality and being non-binary and trans, right? It's so much more, and we have to really unpack that and talk about those conversations. But the respect thing, I think, is a commonality, just like that the poverty, the low income, right? And when you were talking, it really, my spirit hurt for you. My spirit hurt for your spirit, right? Because I've seen the disrespect both of you have been faced with in the academic complex, right? To use Dr. Lazard's language there. But, you know, I've seen it, blatant disrespect, blatant, and knowing, you know, what both of you carry, the knowledge that both of you carry, the connection to community, the connection to family, the commitment to family, you know, the things that happen to you on a daily basis. And then you're faced with this BS, right? By people who, and I'm going to specifically talk about the academy, right? Who are absolutely disrespectful to you, you know, by calling you literally crazy, right? Literally being called crazy. That's what happens, right? It's that hysteria. Where does the word hysteria come from? We know that word, right? And that's what's happening right now, right? The labeling of Indigenous women, two-spirit, trans, non-binary as, you know, crazy. That's occurring, right? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I just wanted to share, like it's really like standing up for each other is so important, and that really is what led to this chat today, right? The conversation we're having today, to give you the opportunity to come forward and talk about this, right? Because when we respond to it, we're poked. People poke, right? And then when you respond, like, see, I told you they're crazy, right? So doing it in this way, hopefully, and hopefully it's a space where you can feed your spirit, right? That's what this is about.
I think one important thing that I want to take up right now, as First Nations, Métis, Inuit folks, I want to go back to whiteness. Just go back to whiteness for a moment. And and white adjacent Indigenous people. In folks in the academic industrial complex get to be Indigenous and have these conversations. And let's be very clear, I'm part of the problem. And there's a lot of work that I, as a First Nations person, need to do and need to do and show up and be reciprocate in relationality, because Black, Indigenous, and Afro-Indigenous folks are not awarded indigeneity, right? So I think that's another cause for concern, not concern, but a space where we as First Nations, Métis, Inuit folks need to continue to take up in particular ways at the continued generosity and patience of our Black, Indigenous, and Afro-Indigenous relatives and kin and siblings, that I also need to do better. Yeah, and yeah.
Andig.
Yeah. I guess I just want to say I agree with everything that you just said. When it comes to Black indigeneity, I feel I'm qualified to speak, and yet I also feel that I have a responsibility to speak, because we have a real problem. Like, I mean, we could have a whole other stoop talk about anti-Black racism in our own community. Yeah, that we need to take ownership in ourselves too. I mean, even if it's not speaking up, not having spoken up enough, you know. When I think about Black Indigenous folks, I think about well, when I think about Black experience on Turtle Island, I feel that we were supposed to be the slaves. That was ours, and they wore it. They carried that for us, that burden. And so we owe a massive debt, you know, because we were supposed to be the slaves.
That wasn't, let's also be very clear, that's not something they chose to do, right? Like we also.
Oh, I know that wasn't something that they chose to do.
They did not choose to do that.
And we would have been if we hadn't been dying so much.
And killed. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the diseases killed us.
Yeah. Yeah. Before COVID hit, I did hold an event that was face to face, really driven by community, but it was driven from the Black Indigenous community. And, you know, we had an event and we had a panel. It was Afro-Indigenous people. And then we had the dancers who were the youth. And that really came out of exactly what you said about, you know, Afro-Indigenous people facing anti-Black racism in the Indigenous community, but also facing anti-Indigenous racism in the Black community, right? And it's really hard for the kids, right? I took my friends' kids to powwow, and you know, one of them was dancing and one of them was going to the vendors and was taking pictures. And, you know, if people look at this person, they're going to see a Black person. They won't know that she's also a status Indian, right? You know, she came back to me and she says, oh, this person just got mad at me because I was taking pictures, and she went on about what a dream catcher was, right? Didn't realize who the person's mom was. I won't say because I haven't gotten permission to tell the story, but you know, I'm like, where are they? Let me go talk to them, right? Because, you know, these kids and these people, these children, these adults are facing this within our community so much, right? And we have to have the conversations, and we have to be supportive, right? We had conversations, I think I've had conversations with both of you about misogyny. And, you know, even with Isaac's upstairs right now, but he'll tell you that I talk about misogyny with him all the time, right? I want him to write a child's book about misogyny. So he'll say, was that misogynist? I'm like, yeah, it was, right? So I think, like, you know, teaching at a young age as well, right? Teaching people about pronouns. But I think the younger generation has it better than us, that's for sure, or better than my generation, that's for sure.
Yeah, can I just say, if going back to, if anything that I said was anti-Black, then I would just like to apologize. And I just believe that we have a real bond with that Indigenous people, and Black people have a real bond. And I believe that that bond is embodied in the Black Indigenous, you know, that they are our children, and we are their children, you know, that we're, and trauma is shared. Like our trauma has been intersected there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm speaking out of my league in a lot of what we're talking about here today. I mean, if we want to talk about literature, I can do that.
No, we're never out of your league. But I want to talk about maybe how, you know, how people who have not been truthful about their identity plays into misogyny. So I think that misogyny is a structure, well, not structure, it's people that make it happen, bring it to life, but it's used in the academy, and it's being used now by people who are not truthful about who they are. So they're using misogyny against Indigenous people as well. So I know that both of you have commented about that. And, you know, I think that Undeg, you're famous by the phrase, you know, close encounter of the pretendian kind, right? I think that almost went viral. So I'm wondering if any of you have any thoughts about that, or personal experiences that you want to share.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I do. My whole experiences, my whole career got taken over by an alleged person. That the words, my own words I've heard coming out of someone's mouth, that my identity has been stolen. My literal identity has been stolen by a person, and my research, yeah, I just like, we have to say alleged, right? But it's really funny how when I always say that pretendianism is not a victimless crime. There are victims, you know, and that when you're stealing someone's identity, yeah, I just don't know how much I can say here, right? but
and see, that's the thing, right? Like, it erases our ability to have truthful conversations, right?
And we have to sit back and just take it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And just watch someone steal our stuff, steal our research.
Yeah.
Steal our identity, steal our awards, you know, steal our career, steal our reputation, badmouth us around the university, tell people how we're misogynist, how we're bullies, how we're crazy, and everybody believes them. You know, it's like we get gaslit to death, and until there's nothing left. You know, there's nothing left, and then that, I guess, is where the power comes from, having nothing left anymore. Yeah. I mean, what are you gonna do? You're gonna take my, you're gonna destroy my reputation. It's already done. You're gonna take my career. It's already done. You know, you're gonna take my words. Yeah, you took my words too, but let me say that I can speak them better, and I'm gonna start speaking. You know, it's time for me to start speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your spirit, and that's your spirit speaking, right?
Yeah.
That's the only truth that we have, right?
Yeah.
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 I have experience, and much like you other folks here at the stoop and those in attendance, and proximity to the stoop can have experience with this. And when we're in institutions, whether it's in community, like the nonprofit industrial complex, the helping sector, the education system, any kind of political system, once these things are identified, say if the person that Lynn, you were the person that was untruthful about who you were, it then gets locked down in mechanisms of the institution where it actually does not benefit me for wanting to bring to the attention. I'm actually the one being bullied. I'm the one that's the person in question is they're trying to silence me, and they're weaponizing whether it's a complaints process, the Human Rights Office, HR, the union, misogyny, and then if there are any kind of paperwork that needs to happen, the added layer that I get to experience in asking a question, hey, where are you from? Who are your people? Mm-hmm. Which is an everyday occurrence between, that's part of the chaptik and how we govern ourselves as Skalok people. Who are you? How are we related? Mm-hmm. Right? Is seen as a human rights violation.
Yeah.
And privacy issue by these institutions that actually are built and doing what they're meant to do, which is protect the person in question, and whether it's their inability because they were scooped or their family was scooped and they were adopted out. And that's a different journey, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not ever criticizing those folks, right? I'm criticizing the folks who are not Indigenous. And have benefited from an Indigenous identity, mm-hmm. by the way of scholarship, by the way of research funds, publications, secured income, right? Which I did not have until a couple of years ago, right? For an actual verified First Nation status under the Indian Act, and our own custom code of protocol and ways of being, which also brings me to the thing that I want to bring to the attention, that when people are not truthful, and those also who are granted their identities after much criticism by nations of people, when the Canadian nation state gives them an Indigenous identity. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say who or what, but I know indigeneity is if you are who you are because of a land. So how is a landless people Indigenous? Right? When the Indigenous nations of those places say, we object this, you don't get to award this people an Indigenous identity, right? Oh, yeah. So that really reminds me of the close encounters of the pretendian kind.
What about right? Blood, Percy?
Yeah.
What about blood?
Versus, and if you're landless, what about
like blood? Blood is what connects us to the land.
Yeah.
Blood is all over. I know people don't like to talk about blood. The other thing I'll throw another thing in there. The word mawakazo. Mawa is to cry, but if you're mawakazo, you're pretending to cry. And these people just pretend they're pretending to cry. You know, when we talk about this stuff, it's not long. Well, some of us are more sensitive than others, but it's not long before we end up in tears when we start thinking about everything that's happened to our people. It's and these people are just pretending to cry. They're pretending that they have our tears, you know. So there's tears, and then there's blood. There's blood, sweat, and tears.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, one thing I want to go back to is something that I've been in conversation with various folks. The notion of the Indian agent, right? And I see, right, colonialism is, and Glenn Couthard has been able to bring and talk about this, red skin, white masks, and it was borrowed from other scholars who had been able to identify the ways in which what happens when colonialism happens to a people, a race, for such and such, for extended periods of time. What happens? They then turn and are able to engage in neocolonialism, where they are the ones doing that. And I wanted to, Indian agents were the ones that rounded up children and put them in the residential schools, made sure Indigenous people didn't engage in ceremony or hunting, or which we now know are our Aboriginal rights and title, approved if we, our past system, whether or not we can get married, all of these atrocious things. And it also gave birth to another foot soldier. I have troubles with certain consonant vowel pairings of what is the Indian scout, right? Which were used in residential schools, in the sense that if Lynn was like, whoa, this is not for me. I didn't sign up for this. Why did my parents or my caregivers put me and my siblings here? We're going back home, right? So it was the Indian Scouts that would go and track, right? So, and oftentimes in the later years, it became Indigenous folks who tracked down our own children and brought them back to residential schools, right? Yeah. So again, the ways in which white supremacy, colonialism has been actualized as successful when white folks no longer have to go searching, no longer have to bully, no longer have to surveil Indigenous women, girls, 2S, LGBTQI folks, because now we have people who have been put in that position to actually go to do the governance over how we speak, how we act, how we dress, the ways we show up in ceremony, the ways we are in the land, what it looks like now for families and parenting or a relative, a caregiver to children. So yeah, that's another layer I wanted to bring to that. Again, the ways in which white supremacy and heteropatriarchy shows up in our communities. Now we have Indian Scouts who now dictate the ways in which we must govern ourselves.
I had a comment from community just on the YouTube, but and how our own, it's exactly what you're saying about the Indian Scout, how our own people who are natives are using pretend Indians to further their own career by pretending to be something they're not, right? So totally about the Indian Scout and how misogyny is used by the academy, and it's going unaddressed, right? Because how can you address an Indigenous man, right? How can we address that within the academy? But yet we can be addressed and erased, right? Yeah. You're going to say something on Dig? Sorry.
No, I'm listening.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you know, we've had other conversations, you know, it's all linked. Like if you think about, you know, the pretendianism, misogyny, and the tools, right, that are used. You know, I think when I went out to U of M and I was their vice provost, Indigenous engagement initially, after I left, I wrote, actually while I was still there, I wrote about being the Indian agent, right? I didn't think about the Indian Scout piece, but being the Indian agent within the institution to deal with the Indian problem, right? What they saw as the Indian problem. I'm like, that's not what I signed up for, right? So luckily I could leave, like I was fortunate enough to leave. And, you know, I remember before I left, May Louise Campbell came to me, we're doing a decolonizing event, and she rubbed my cheeks and she goes, my girl, it can't be done, meaning we can't decolonize, right? So when we enter into these structures, and we're playing a role, like Percy said, right? We're contributing. We're part of this institution. We're part of the colonial institution. It's easier said than done to just leave. Like I think the three of us definitely have come from lives that were impacted heavily by poverty, right? So, to leave this position, and we've put so much into our, undergraduate, our master's, our PhD, and, before my sister Suzanne passed away, she said, like, do they know how hard you worked? Right? It's not easy to just leave. It's like, but I just want my pension. Right? I want my pension to be a bit higher, because it's damaging. And, I used to tell a story about my dad who, left home when he was either 9 or 12. I don't know the full story, but he was definitely abused by his dad, like significantly. And when I decided to go to university as a mature student, he said, be careful, Linny, make sure it doesn't make you go crazy. And those were his words. And I'm like, what does he know about university? He's never gone to university. Like, I knew that he only maybe finished half of grade 1 or something, right? But obviously he knew something, because going back to May Louise Campbell, right? Like these are environments that are going to do harm, and we need our warriors, right? And the two of you are warriors, right? We need our warriors, but we need to find space to rejuvenate as well, right? And to come together and have good conversation and good food and good stoop talk, and just support each other. Kind of rhymed off a bit there, but go ahead, Percy.
Yeah, I would say that the academic industrial complex needs us more than we need it. Yes, do we deserve nice things? Yeah, we've had so many things data mined and extracted from us, from non-Indigenous folks, racialized folks, Indigenous men in the academic industrial complex. I think I'm here out of stubbornness. I love to teach. I have a healthy research portfolio with no infrastructural support, because I have now 17 research projects in the millions of dollars in my research that document the 2S LGBT National Action Report was able to impact the ways in which housing, the CMHC made their announcements, MarCEN, whatever feelings we have about them, see how it just magically just appeared into the space, right? If you can, read it. Include 3 other people to read it, and it's very clear and concise. So it needs me. I know it hasn't always been a lovely ride. It actually hasn't been a ride. I feel like I've constantly gotten whiplash and concussion being here, because my academic journey was, I'm an alumni of whatever the heck you're naming yourself now. I used to teach there, whatever the heck you name yourself now. Was responsible behind the scenes for some of the things that are the labor, the fruit that's happening now. But it's always been difficult. It's been difficult. It's been violent. It's been isolating. And people have tried to silence me. People have bullied me. People have threatened me. And then people along the way, Indigenous folks, a person in attendance, my fam, Dr. Adil Abdullahi, was the one who really, with their labor and the labor of Fierce Brown Femme, was able to drag my ass over the finish line to get my doctorate done. Right? When Indigenous men in the institution up and left the middle of being my supervisor, and would champion white adjacent or white settler students for their PhDs. And I was up and left multiple times. And it wasn't until community reminded me and had connections to drag my ass over the finish line to get my doctorate. Yeah, so it hasn't been easy. And I think as well, as someone who's confident, someone who knows who the heck they are, and takes their roles and responsibilities and is invested not in a capitalist sense, but the way I was raised up, not drug up, in relationships and relationality, is what scared Indigenous men from championing me to complete my PhD, which should have been done in 2011, not 2021, right? And I know I've been overlooked for positions because of gatekeepers labeling me a particular something because I'm forward. But yet, if a cis femme non-binary person can say it, and they have boundaries, and I'm just being violent, allegedly, and I am being direct, and that's a threat. Yet someone else who doesn't look like me or sound like me is afforded the space to get support and be championed and be honored and celebrated, and not silenced and bullied like me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Percy, there's a question in the Q&A. I think you can see it, but Shelley is asking if there's a link to that document. Appreciate it greatly. I'm just looking for it and I can't find it quickly.
Oh.
If you have a link to the electronic, would you just type it in there? And I wanted to, oh gosh, that's the short-term memories just hitting me right now.
Yeah, can I just pick up on what you said, Lynn, about your dad saying, be careful,
Sure.
Lenny,
Yeah.
that they don't, because the other thing that I found a lot in the academy is classism, you know, and found it, it comes very hard against you. Like, well, as soon as you open your mouth, everybody knows that you're not, or at least for me anyway. But then again, I'm just thinking as you were talking, and maybe the fact that we don't fit here is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the last thing we want is to fit in. Maybe the last thing we want is to be recognized by this thing, you know, this institution that was planted here in our lands, you know. It's alien. It's an alien thing, and we don't belong, and we shouldn't belong. And maybe it's not such a bad thing that we. I mean, it sure hurts a lot, but maybe it's a good sign if we do face bullying.
Yeah, and then you find people who you can connect with, right? So
yeah,
that's why our relationships are lasting with the three of us, right? Well, my relationship with both of you. I have a comment. Tell Percy, because it hurts, it makes it right, because they are a warrior. So that's just a comment. I had a thought just beforehand, but that's what happens when you have too many head injuries and the short-term memory kicks in. But it'll come back to me. But yeah, it's gone right now. I don't know if any of you have a comment at the moment.
We have about 20 minutes, and I know I want to be mindful of people's time as they need to.
That's actually what I was going to do. I was going to say, if you have any questions, thank you. It came.
Yeah.
So there's a Q&A and the chat is closed, but if you want to put any comments in there or questions, we can address it. And I'm also trying to check Zoom as well, but go ahead, Percy.
But I usually know when people come to these spaces, like, well, what do you want me to do? Right? That's just me being dramatic. I love to be dramatic. Right? Well,
dramatic.
What do you want me to do? What do I want you to do? What do I want? One thing that can help is use my freaking pronouns. Role model that you are a space that I want to, again, name it. I want to be ethical here. I can never make this a safe space. Doesn't matter if I'm one of 3 people who are Indigenous, 2-spirit, gender diverse, disabled. There are 3 of us, and I believe 1 person here is in attendance that have those intersecting identities. And it's unethical for me to say that this can be a safe space. It can't. I don't have control over anything. I have little to no decision making. Yes, I have an education. Yes, I finally have a stability, and I'm not having to work 6 jobs. Yeah, I had to work 6 jobs, much like these folks and people in attendance have had to do with intersecting identities, to make sure we ate, had a place to sleep that was somewhat safe, and had access to clothes, right? And that's not even talking about vacations and whatnot. But be a brave person. So respond. Think about making the distinction between responding to something and reacting to something. I'd rather people respond to situations than react, because reaction means I have to coddle you and take care of you when I'm exhausted at the ways in which I am constantly experiencing microaggressions and microassaults, and conscious biases, right? So create a brave space, simple things. Put your frickin', and for those who did, put your pronouns in your names when you log into spaces. And I want to know what you do when nobody's looking. When I'm not in the room, what are you doing in the spaces that you're at when people want to have a conversation about Percy the terrible, or Percy that they make me scared, or Percy the confident, or Percy the leader, or Percy who's leading, who's taken the licks, and let's hold space for Percy, or Undig, or Lynn, or the people in attendance here who have taken licks for trying to bring forward being a good relative. Continue to educate yourself, and don't send us emails to say, can you tell me where I can learn more? You can learn from the over 200 National Inquiry MMIWG2S, my document that I was the lead writer of, the TRC, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, and the Red Paper Policy. And because the scooped relatives and kin are mobilizing, I'm bringing attention to that experience, and we're going through the compensation program, and there's going to be literature and calls to action. Ready yourself to champion that as non-Indigenous people, so I don't have to do it. So I don't have to feel I'm dying today because I'm having to engage in trauma porn to say, look what happened to tens of thousands of us. Care, people, care about what happened to us. Have those hard conversations with people in your life. Call in people to say that's actually not the pronoun they go by, or that's not the experience of Percy. Think about your own conscious biases when you encounter an Indigenous person who isn't who you think they are, a thing of the past. A particular type of ceremony, and a skirt and a smudge and a drum to sing away the colonial white fragility, right? There's so much beauty in all aspects of who we are as Indigenous people, and even more so when it comes to intersecting identities. Because look to the land and water defenders. It's 2S LGBTQI folks who are leading the way for all of us. There's a thing or two we could learn from the land and water defenders, right? That we tend to forget or have amnesia about. In the academic industrial complex, the nonprofit sector, administrators, because I see some administrators here, and based on names, get back to basics, right? Don't have a particular picture of what indigeneity is. It's vast, and be comfortable with that vastness, because the future is Stamia and Minimjilks.
I wanted to just say something about today, and how, I really want to also recognize and honor the people who are, doing that work. And it's not an academic conversation at all. Like, I think about, many of my friends who are not employed, let alone precariously employed, are asked at this time to go and speak here, go and speak there. And it's like, all power to them, right? Like they're being put up in hotels in Toronto and, you know, doing events for today and leading up today and after today. So, you know, there are people in our community who are doing that work. It's not my work. Like I'm not here to support non-Indigenous people's careers. And I made that very clear. Yeah, I wanted to bring something up because I don't think you both have really met, but y'all play hockey, right? Yeah,
Damn right.
yeah. So Andre, are you left-handed actually?
Shoots left.
Yeah, shoots left. So and Percy plays hockey as well. So yeah. And you're not playing right now, Andeg, right?
No, I have to get some new equipment. I have no equipment left.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Can I just say, like, just one other thing is that for me, the bullying that I've experienced has been worse coming from my own people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but the thing about that is that it was triggered by somebody who's not, or let me say, somebody who has shown zero evidence and yet is able to reap the rewards of being Indigenous. But yeah, if I wanted something to be done, it's come and talk to me, you know. Don't hear the stories that somebody who has yet to say, you know, like if somebody claims to be Indigenous, fine. There are so many different ways to be Indigenous and so many, you know, different variations and lacks of paperwork and whatever. But if you're not gonna, if you're gonna claim to be Indigenous, you should be able to at least show something to the world, you know, whatever. You should be able to show how you are if you're gonna do that. But if you are Indigenous, and you hear things about somebody who's like, why don't you go and ask that person? Why don't you go and hear the stories? Yeah, from that person. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Anyway, but back to hockey. Yeah, I'm pretty good, Percy.
Do you play, Joanne?
Pardon me?
What position do you play?
Whatever, but I like to I guess forward, left wing, center. I'm getting a little old for center, so, and even defense sometimes. Yeah.
And Percy?
I'm a goalie and I'm a defender. I don't need to have the accolades. I like to set up tape to tape passes for the assist, and I got stones for hands. Not a lot can get past me because I was in a former lifetime an elite athlete. Was on one of many national teams, and one of them was softball. But I was in a tournament in Germany, and I blew out my. I think I have one ligament, but I blew out my knee, and I've blown out my knee and knees in a lot of sports because I used to do track and field, long distance. My fastest mile was 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Damn.
I've gotten 13 medals. I believe 4 bronze, 1 silver, and the rest. I don't know how to add. I'm just a social work professor, and the rest in
I'll
gold.
sit back on the bench.
Right? No, but now and I only came to play hockey because I blew out my knee in a softball tournament playing against a Team Netherlands. And then went to the emergency, and the doctor said, well, you can't hurt it anymore. And then they said, don't have surgery here, go back to Canada. The tournament finished. We placed first, 1 gold. I wasn't back catching, didn't go to shortstop, which are the most active positions. I stayed on first because what I could do is just catch the ball, right? Came back, and the doctor, the sports doctor said, no, keep playing. I said, well, can I play hockey? And so I started playing floor hockey, and then eventually went to ball hockey. I don't know how to skate. My life provider was a natural athlete. They were a goalie signed with the Detroit Red Wings. They were signed to 2 farm teams for professional baseball. They were Golden Glove boxer, and they were a buckle bull rider. So that speaks a lot. And they were able to escape some elements of the school, because the residential school, because they were often traveling as an athlete.
Yeah.
So it's hereditary. It's in my bones that I'm an athlete.
What about you,
And
Ane?
then,
Me? Well, I
you're,
don't.
you're an elite athlete.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm good in the corner, you know.
Yeah. No, I don't play hockey. I'm not good with little balls. I hate little balls. It's like it doesn't work for me. But I did actually, I'm good with I did play softball in Regent Park actually. That was always fun because there was always a fight breaking out. So, and do you remember that time, Undeg, where, because I did Taekwondo, so I'm a black belt in Taekwondo, and I can't remember, we were somewhere traveling and you checked me.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, I thought I could take a hit. I can't take a hit. Like a hit in hockey? No, I can take a punch.
I didn't really, I barely touched you, but
no,
I'm sorry.
Not true, not true.
But I also, you kicked my door in. You kicked my door in.
I did kick your door in. I had to save your daughter.
You did save my daughter.
Situation. Yeah. But yeah, I think we've all you know, I think that kind of relates to, like, we can all relate on a sport level, and you know how people also perceive us as a violent, right? Because we're all warriors in our own way, not necessarily
Because we've had to survive, right?
Yep, it had to be. And we got it from our ancestors. We got it from our parents, our grandparents, you know, our life providers, our, you know, our friends, our allies. You know, we had to be there. But I'm just tired. I want to take a break. I just want to play with my dog. You know,
I'm tired too. I'm tired. I feel that I've taken all I can take.
Yeah.
And it's really telling that we have to say that we've taken all we can take. But I know when I started my introduction, or whatever the heck I did, I acknowledged those who came before me, and that's why I'm able to be in this conversation.
Yeah.
And one of those people is Christos, and Beth Brandt, Connie Fife, right? The Femmes, Two Spirit folks, who told me to protect myself as a young stud, whatever, you know, at that time that was a language in terms of butch and femme. And they said, don't let those white people name you who you are. You find the words in your language, and you have your language speakers identify who you are. Don't let white people in whiteness continue to name you, right? That hopefully people recognize that these conversations are vital and important, and they're ours to have. And that I hope, because again, what can you do? Let me make decisions as the chair, because I have 2 positions I have to hire. Let me make decisions and honor and celebrate Indigenous thinkers and scholars, right? And to bring in folks to truly honor and celebrate their gifts as thinkers and scholars. Let me create the research institute that I want to create. Let me go after the super shirks that we're going to go after, Lynn, for a global presence of 2S LGBTQI folks, right? Let me do those things and get out of my way. And if you're a non-Indigenous person, lend me labor to be in the best position to get those things. Because when I get those things, I actually, you know what? The Two Spirit Subworking Group they got so mad at me, because I did not want to put my name on that document. I didn't, because it's the work for all of us, right? I really worked hard on bringing the experiences of our relatives in the North, the Inuit folks, around 2S LGBTQI violence, either as sex workers or formerly trafficked or in relationships with partners, and the experiences of trans folks. right? I brought that front and center and I advocated hard. And so since they said you have to put your name on it, what do? I bring 2 students with me. People I was in relationship with in terms of indigeneity to indigeneity, thinkers, grassroots people. So the next 2 authors are up and coming emergent people who are going to be on the national, who are already doing things in their own nations. Noe and Don Marie. And then I put all the other people, right? But my thing has always been to folks, for those who want to know, what do you give us a to-do list, Percy? Which I think that was the most terrible thing that came out of the 90s, cultural competency. So if you need that moment right now, folks, succession planning, support Indigenous people in your life with succession planning. Because I'm already thinking, who's going to be in this position in 5 years? Who's going to be in the position? Why are there not at least 1,000 folks with intersecting identities in community, in the nonprofit sector, and the academic industrial complex, and researchers who are making decisions that reflect my identities? I shouldn't be one of 3 nationally. I shouldn't. I say shame, right? So support me and the many like me who aren't giving, who don't know Lynn to be able to be invited into this space. Create opportunities, because I always say this should not be the only conversation. There should be a saturation of thousands of perspectives on misogyny, kʷil, and the ways in which we are targeted because of our indigeneity, sex, gender, and ability. There should be thousands.
Yeah.
This might be the first, but I want to see more. So create opportunities for scaffolding to happen, meaning you build, right? I have taken these steps, which is very ableist, but I have been able to be on this journey, and I've taken my licks and kicks, and get out of the way. So the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people that I'm taking with me to say, here's a roadmap through these systems and structures. This is the legend that I've used. Where do you want to go and what do you want to do? And I will leverage what little power I have to help you to get to where you need to go. And I will build a relationship with you, with other people who can help leverage their whiteness or the power that they have to help you get there. The only thing I ask is you take 2 or 3 people with you. So you then turn around and help 2 or 3 others. And then you ask them to help 2 or 3 others. So for the people who want a to-do list, that's what you can do. And what are you doing and saying when I'm not in the room? When it comes to people talking about me, or talking about Indigenous people, talking about 2S LGBTQI folks, femmes, women, and young folks, disabled folks. What are you doing? Right?
Yeah. I've witnessed both of you, and since we're talking about misogyny as well, I've witnessed both of you defend a cisgendered Indigenous man when, they were, and they were separate incidences, right? But I've seen you both, and I think that's what we have to do, what Indigenous men need to do for two-spirit, non-binary, trans, Indigenous femmes, right? And we need to support each other. So, I think that, we talked about this talk, and, a lot of times you might get 100 people registered, and we were like, well, why aren't people registering? I think it's, people think we're having a bashing conversation, or, and that's not what this is about. It's about holding space, right? And I just wanted to acknowledge that both of you, I've seen both of you defend an Indigenous man who is being treated treated poorly. So I just had that thought, sorry. We've got 1 minute left, and I'm wondering, Undeg, if you have any closing words. No pressure now.
No pressure. Well, I don't know. I guess I guess just thinking about my aunt and teacher, she talked, because she was a fluent speaker, and she talked about how they used to get the kids who spoke English better
Mhm.
would bully the ones who didn't.
Mm.
And the way that the bullying is, it's like the colonizer gets us to bully ourselves, you know, and also, so I guess just stop bullying, stop bullying, you know, all kinds of bullying.
Yep. Just stop. What can you do? Just stop.
Stop.
it.
Yeah, stop
Stop
it.
it now.
Yeah.
I want to say miigwech to both of you. Merci. And thank you everybody for attending. I want to thank Angeline and Randall for supporting, and the other folks in the Faculty of Community Services that have supported this talk. And I know it's been a rough day, and go and do you, and we'll connect. Hi, all my relations. Oh, Percy, go ahead.
Take care, folks. Oh, I started with music. We're going to end with music.
Okay, yay.
All right.
Woohoo! Yes.
That's not playing.
And you'll probably end with a dog barking, by the way.
Take care, relatives and kin.
Ooh. Miigwech, yes.